Welcome to another edition of the Hail to Michigan podcast. I am your host, Ronnie Harder, and today I am joined by my good friend, Matt. Matt, how are you?
Doing good. Excited to talk about big win and a big one coming up.
Yeah, this is going to be my favorite review to go over so far this season. Contown's out today. He's a little sick. He went to the game this past Saturday when they played Wisconsin, and he's just feeling a little bit under the weather, which I understand. So it'll just be me and Matt today, and we're going to start out with the Michigan versus Wisconsin game. It was a 38-17 beatdown from Michigan where they just dominated Wisconsin in every aspect on all three levels on both sides of the ball. I thought the offense actually clicked really well. I thought Josh Gaddis called his best game that he's ever called in his, 3 years now? Is it 3 years at Michigan, Matt?
This is either his third or his fourth.
Yeah, I can't believe he's been here that long already. But either way, this is his best game that he's called. From the flea flicker to establishing the run game enough to where they can, hit those play action deep passes. I just thought all around it was a great game. And then the defense was just magnificent. I know Wisconsin's offense isn't the greatest in the world, but I thought Michigan's defense was able to not only get pass rushers home. I mean, I think they hit the quarterbacks 29 times or something like that, or it was like 29 quarterback hurries on 29 dropbacks. It was absolutely insane. What'd you think, Matt?
Yeah, I thought, especially being on the road, this is probably the most complete game Michigan has played in a while. They've played some really, really good complete games at home. I think back to Notre Dame a couple years ago, and they didn't throw the ball a bunch in that game because it was raining quite a bit. But just on the road, it seems like we come out typically under Harbaugh, and it's been a different team when we play a quality opponent. And it didn't feel that way on Saturday at all. Michigan felt like the same team they've been, maybe to a little lesser degree in the run game. But I probably credit that to Wisconsin's defense. And they just looked good. They looked excited. It just was an overall complete performance on the road, which we just haven't seen in a while against a quality opponent. So that was a noticeable change.
Yeah, from the start, Michigan just looked so focused and so determined to win that game. I don't think we've ever seen that from a Harbaugh team on the road. I know you said that it's been a while, but I don't think we've ever seen it.
There's been a couple. What I'll say would be like maybe a little lesser talent, not like an equal footing program that they've played pretty well in. I guess the Penn State game, I'm kind of discounting the first quarter of that game.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense because that first quarter was terrible.
Yeah, but that game overall, they played pretty well.
Michigan.
Looked like themselves. But there haven't been very many. I mean, even some of the lesser talented teams. I think back to Northwestern a few years ago, or I think that was 18, where they kind of had to squeak it out.
Yeah, that 2017. It was 20-17. I remember that game.
Yep.
That was the Karan Higdon game.
Yep.
So
yeah,
no.
Iowa in 16. That I think Michigan in 2016 was so much better than Iowa, but they just looked terrible when they played there. So
yeah, they looked really bad, and it's hard enough to play at Iowa, especially at night. So
yep.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of excitement coming out of this win from this past Saturday, and I want to start on the defense first because that performance that we saw was magnificent, and from David Ojabo's breakout performance to Hutchinson just not being able to be blocked by Wisconsin to Dax Hill, who had a couple, I won't say miscues because he was actually in good coverage. It was just two of the best throws Mertz has ever made in his entire life, I would say. But honestly, Dax played great from that blitz that knocked Mertz out to the interception where he baited the quarterback while they were in, what was it, cover two? He was underneath. So
he was underneath.
Yeah.
He baited him into throwing the corner, and he slid.
That wasn't there. And God, who else? I mean, you didn't hear Gray's name all game, so he obviously played great. I thought Mozzie Smith played a hell of a game. Hinton played a hell of a game. Man, they just looked great. It was good having Josh Ross back. He looked really good. Nikhil Green was flying all over the field. I don't know if you noticed that, but that was something that I definitely noticed while watching the game. Him and Colson were flying all over the field. Um, just in all, just a great overall performance by all three levels on defense. So, Matt, kind of go over what you saw from David Ojabo and his big time performance and what it means going forward for Michigan, opposite of Hutch.
Yeah, so Ojabo has had the two big spin move sacks in the prior games this year, and he seems to kind of have solidified his role a little bit. Mike Morse seems to be more the every down edge defender when they're in kind of their nickel look, opposite of Aiden. But Ojabo in this game, it seemed like they played quite a bit more base. I didn't do the charting. I didn't have time this week to go through the charting of 3-4 versus their 2-4 nickel look. But he seemed to really solidify himself as the edge opposite. I didn't see Jalen Harold nearly as much, and I think that's kind of a product of Ojabo's play lately. What it means going forward, if he continues to take steps, I mean, I don't think anyone expected him to be elite by the end of the year, and I still don't really expect that. But when you're opposite a guy like Aiden, who is just completely unblockable this year, whether it's a double team in the run game, they put three guys on him sometimes in the pass game. Aiden has been a monster. So the guy opposite of Aiden, he doesn't have to be elite, but if he's very good, you're tough to deal with for any opponent. So Ojabo taking steps is huge for this defense. We talked a little bit preseason about different guys, whether it was Jamon Green taking a step, one of the linebackers, some of the interior D linemen. If Ojabo takes a step, Michigan's pass defense, the corners aren't nearly as big of a concern. It just means a ton for the defense. And truthfully, it'll free up Aiden.
That's a game changer. You're talking about having a guy where, Hutchinson, we know what he brings, and he's being double teamed a lot. If you can have a guy on the opposite side where you're like, okay, we can't double team Hutch anymore because we got to worry about this other guy. I mean, that's huge. Like you said, for the pass defense, in years past, whenever we go up against teams like Ohio State, the pass rush would be non-existent, and then the DBs would be torched. If they can get somewhat of a pass rush against these really good offensive lines going down later on in the schedule, I don't think Penn State has the greatest offensive line, but it's definitely going to be one of the better ones that we see all season. And then Ohio State's offensive line is really good too. So it's going to be huge for a guy like Ojabo to step up and really show what he's capable of. And that was a really good sign that we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, it's kind of a big problem across college football. Offensive lines not being great this year. I don't know what the reason for, if there were a couple down recruiting classes in a row.
Even Oklahoma.
That's exactly what I was going to point to.
They're terrible.
Oklahoma's offensive line is very bad this year. You mentioned Penn State. Wisconsin's defense, and again, Wisconsin's defense is certainly the strength of their program, but Wisconsin handled them up front. So even their offensive line has some weaknesses. I don't want to get too far ahead, but the Nicholas Petit-Frere for Ohio State, I believe I saw a stat this year that he hasn't given up a pressure yet.
Yeah, he's excellent.
And their other tackle, DeJuan Jones, was good enough to move Thayer Mumford into guard. So he's a pretty good player too. That, if it comes down to that game, and that's kind of a push or maybe even a little advantage Michigan, I don't think anyone would have projected Ohio State's tackles being a push with Michigan's edge rushers. But if Ojabo keeps taking these steps, it could very well be an advantage.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would say another player that stood out in this game against Wisconsin was Mozzie Smith. I thought he did a very good job of plugging the holes and keeping that run game of Wisconsin's really a complete standstill. I mean, how many rushing yards did they even have against Michigan this past Saturday? I mean, it was less than 100, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Way less than 100.
I just looked at that. They had 43, but that counts in the sack yardage.
Okay, gotcha. So like true rushing yards.
Yeah, true rushing yards. They had 4 guys. Let's see, 30, 48 plus 20.
So they had a little over 100 then.
No, they had
No?
67, 74, under 80.
Under 80. Wow.
Yeah.
If you told me that they would be under 80, and this would be the exact outcome that I would have predicted for Michigan.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it was excellent. But, kind of talk about Mozzie, and I guess not really his emergence this year, because we've already talked about his emergence quite a bit. It seems like every game he's standing out, but how important it is for him to break out so far like he has, and how important it was for him to break out in this game against Wisconsin.
Yeah, so absolutely. That was when we talked preseason about guys, that could really help this defense take a big step. I believe he was the guy either I'm pretty sure is who I mentioned. But we all pointed to the Washington and Wisconsin game as, needing that stout nose tackle.
Yeah.
They even brought in the coaches, I think, more so for depth, but they even brought in Jordan Whitley,
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, what if Mozzie can't hold up? And the fact that he has, and he's continued to grow is just a testament to him and how well he's played and developed. I just think fans sometimes get impatient because we all follow recruiting with offensive linemen and defensive linemen. Even the best of the best, like your 5-star freshmen, they may play, but they're usually getting handled pretty well. Now, pass rusher on the edge, it's a little bit different because you can just protect them and put them in on 3rd down and just say go. But when you're right in the center of the defense like that, the conditioning level, the hand placement, the gap integrity, staying where you're supposed to be and not getting moved around. That's one of the biggest problems that Michigan has had the last few years on the interior.
Mm-hmm.
Mozzie's development there has been very impressive. And it's on schedule. I mean, would we have liked it to be earlier? Sure. We want all of our, young guys to do well, but I think this is kind of a realistic timeline for a lot of defensive linemen. Year
For
3,
most.
absolutely. Year
Honestly,
3, when you're a solid starter, which I would say Mozzie has been so far this year. Same with Hinton. And then
I think solid starter is underselling it. I think he's actually been excellent. One of our better players on the defense.
See, I would say that about Hinton. I think Hinton's
been excellent too.
Yeah, I think
he's been our best D lineman.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Hinton has been our best D lineman. I think he's had 2 pretty dominant performances.
Yes.
And Mozzie's not far behind him, but even if that solid starter is the goal, even if he's above that, Mozzie or Hinton, if that's the goal, solid starter, like they're right on track, and those guys should be excellent next year. I mean,
yeah.
So his development this year has been huge. It's been important for the defense, especially in the spot where we lack depth. I mean, I think a lot of us expect a guy like Kenneth Grant to come in next year and be probably in the 2 deep right away at nose.
Yeah, I mean,
despite what I just said about it being hard for freshmen, we just don't have a lot of bodies for our base package nose tackle.
There might be a market for another grad transfer.
Yeah. Yep.
I would be, at least.
Maybe patch that hole for 1 year to make sure Grant is ready. But Mozzie's been great for the defense this year, and I think the scheme does fit him a little bit better. He was kind of in between, and I think they tried to get him to cut some weight to play in the old scheme. And
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure he has a wrestling background, if I remember correctly.
he does. I remember when he was being evaluated by Nick Baumgardner back when it was before he was with the Athletic. I think it was when he was with the Free Press, and he was talking about if Mozzie Smith doesn't ever make it as a defensive tackle, they should try him out at interior O-line because he's an absolute mauler and his hands are amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So, for that, he was kind of in between, but I think this scheme fits him better, just from his build to his skill set. So I really think his development has been huge. And, a guy that takes a lot of flack from the Michigan fan base, Sean Nua.
He's proved everybody wrong. And then some.
Yeah, the way he finished last year's interior defensive line class with Benny, Ike, and George Rooks, and then this year already having Mason Graham, Kenny Grant, and the development of those interior players, and they're rotating a ton still.
Yep.
I mentioned a few episodes ago that they would cut down, and they have some cut down the rotation against the better teams, but I mean, we're still seeing guys like Jenkins. Morris plays inside when we're in base. He plays some on the edge as well. Julius Welshoff gets in there. Jeter, Whitley. I mean, they're playing for those D tackle spots or the interior 3 on the 3-4 set.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing 6+ guys. So yeah, it's Sean Nua deserves a lot of credit, but the players are the ones putting in the work, and Mozzie and Hinton have taken big steps this year, and I expect that to continue.
Yeah, and this might sound stupid when it comes to Nua, but I remember when after his first year, there were a lot of complaints, and people were like, "Oh God, Nua sucks," this, that, and the other. And one of the things that I focused on with Nua was kind of studying like his previous coaching experience. So it didn't really work out too well for him on the coaching side at Arizona State, and it didn't work out well for him at Michigan in his first year. His second year, honestly, the second year is just a wash, which was last year. So you kind of look back, he was a player for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then he became a coach, I think, at BYU. But I don't think he was the defensive line coach. And then he went to Navy, and he was there for 5 or 6 years or something like that. And he was defensive line coach there. I think a big thing with him is that he's so used to playing in and coaching in a 3-4 scheme, or just like a 3 defensive lineman scheme rather than like the 4 defensive linemen. I think that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. That was one of the things I've thought during this offseason that, I kind of looked at it with a negative light at that time. Like, if he can't coach these guys in this scheme, then what,
Right.
But I did think the same thing. Like, if he can get back to what he's more comfortable with, the 3-4, the kind of hybrid 2 gap. I think McDonald said the other day they're trying to play a 1.5 gap scheme. So it's a little bit different than your true, 2 gapping scheme. But it's just something that he's more comfortable with. I think you're exactly right. And, you can evaluate better when you're comfortable in the scheme.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an option coach, if you're Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech, you go and try to completely switch to an air raid, you're not going to know what you're looking for. You're not going to know the skills
100%.
required, the body types, all those things. So from a comfort standpoint, I think you're exactly right. I think the scheme change not only benefited a lot of the players, but Sean Nua specifically, and it's helped the D-line take some steps.
They've taken huge steps, and that was my biggest concern for the defense heading into the season. It's kind of like, okay, I know what Hinton can do, but can he do it? That's the big thing. We know what Mozzie Smith is capable of. We saw it in high school. Can he make that extra leap this year when they need him the most? Because there was a ton of pressure on Mozzie Smith to perform the way he has, and then some. He's exceeded every expectation for me. and who was going to be that other guy on the defensive line. And I feel like there's been a couple that's shown out for Michigan this year. Chris Jenkins has done really well this year in the time that he's played. I thought Mike Morris has been pretty good this year. We saw Derek Jeter, good Lord, Donovan Jeter, kind of falter out of the rotation a little bit more as the weeks go by. I think the younger guys are stepping up and they're playing really well for Michigan right now along the defensive line, really everywhere, but especially that D line. They deserve a ton of credit. Noah deserves a ton of credit. McDonald, he deserves a ton of credit. My favorite thing about McDonald so far is the in-game adjustments that he's able to make. I thought during halftime, he saw what happened in the last two drives for Wisconsin and completely shut that down going forward. So big kudos to him. He's got these guys playing at a really high level. But let's take it over to the offensive side of the ball and kind of talk about, what was an amazing game called by Josh Gaddis. The running game obviously probably had their worst game statistically in the season, which was expected against this amazing Wisconsin run defense. But I thought they did enough to open up the play action for Cade. And, Cade was a little uncomfortable at first, but I thought that flea flicker really opened things up for him and really got him settled and comfortable. And I thought he played a pretty good, if not an excellent game the rest of the way after that first quarter. So kind of talk about what you saw from Cade and just the passing game overall for Michigan.
Yeah, Cade played much better. Again, first drive is not great.
Yeah.
I actually probably 2 of the 3 passes on the first drive I complained about. Just
I did too.
His timing seemed a little off, and throwing behind guys a little bit. But he really settled in. I thought this was his best performance so far, and that includes last year. Hitting, as we've said in previous episodes, hitting the short to intermediate routes consistently is what's going to keep the job Cade's. I mean, he's going to stay as the starter if he can hit those guys consistently. If he can't, that's when you start to see issues like the Rutgers game.
Yeah.
JJ is super talented. I love what they're doing with him.
He's so good, man.
Mixing him in without creating true controversy. I love what they're doing with that. But if Cade keeps hitting like he did pretty much after the first drive, it's going to be tough for JJ to wrestle that away from him this year, at least. I think Cade's timing was good. A lot of complaints about his reading. We've talked a little bit offline. A lot of the complaints are on non-read type plays, whether that be RPO or read option. He is not missing a read if they're not leaving a guy unblocked in the option game.
Yeah. If there's no read, there's no reason to complain.
Yeah, there's nothing that he's missing. On the RPO stuff, they didn't run a ton of it this game, but he's struggled a little bit with that. But we've seen him hit those in stride too. Rutgers last year and last week. So he's in command still, which is good. Still taking care of the football, another good thing. I thought he took a step on Saturday. We'll see. We'll see moving forward, but played a pretty good game. Probably his best one yet.
Yeah, I mean, he had a couple throws here and there where I was like, God damn, that Donovan Edwards wheel route, that would have been a touchdown if it was like a second earlier.
Yep.
That was pretty maddening. But I mean, man, overall, I mean, he made that great back shoulder throw to Eric All in the red zone. I thought that was great. Cornelius Johnson had himself a really nice game, little breakout party for him, so that was really good. We saw JJ's beautiful deep ball to Dalen Baldwin in garbage time. I think that really got the fans riled up and they were really happy to see that. I think a lot of them were calling for JJ to take over even after seeing that, but I'm not ready for that yet. I think Cade's played a really clean game so far this season, and he hasn't really shown any reason to take him out other than second half against Rutgers. But yeah, as I was saying, coming into the season, he's very Alex Smith like in this, and JJ's like your Colin Kaepernick. He's the exciting young guy, great arm, who makes plays every time he comes in. Um, Fortunately for Cade, he just hasn't made that mistake that Alex Smith did. He just wasn't doing enough for them to win. So hopefully he continues that. Obviously next year, I fully anticipate JJ being the starter, but we're not there yet. There's no reason to have those conversations. So I'm not worried about Cade or the quarterback play right now. It's Matt. Talk about what you saw from the offensive line in this game. I thought they looked pretty good. Obviously, they could have played better, I thought, but overall, what do you think of the offensive line play from this game?
Yeah, I thought in the pass pro specifically, they held up very well. I was a little concerned about that coming into the game. They showed in past games that the rushing attack will be just fine. We haven't really faced a dominant pass rush yet, and I thought Wisconsin had a very good pass rush coming into the game. I thought they held up well in the pass pro. Cade got hit a few times, but that's just football. That's going to happen. In the run game, I thought they were done a little bit of a disservice. I thought Gaddis called a great game, but I do think in the run game, he put them in a couple situations with the kind of their base run play, the split zone, that were tough. A lot of times I saw, is it John Dews? Is that his first name? He does like the morning recap, and he was
I don't know what his first name is, but yeah.
He was mentioning a lot of with the Wisconsin defensive lineman crossing our offensive lineman, and one time it was Schoonmaker, the tight end, but crossing their face. And if we're running inside zone to the right, off the center or the right guard, the backside defensive end is crossing our cutoff block, and I do think that certainly that point stands, you don't want that guy to cross the face of the backside cutoff. I think a couple of times they had the right play call for that, slanting to the play, which makes it even more difficult. Overall, I thought it was pretty good. They ran the ball. They went over 100 yards. It wasn't very efficient. It took a lot of carries to get there. I didn't notice any one particular standout in this game. If I had to point to one guy, I would say Stuber, just because I didn't notice many mistakes from Stuber.
No.
So overall, I thought they played pretty well because of the pass rush. Or keeping their pass rush at bay. I'd probably say a B+ type game for them.
Yeah.
Overall, so. They showed, and I think it was Nick Baumgartner that said this, that they showed on Saturday that they are good enough that, no matter what, they're going to be able to survive. And we've had offensive lines in the past where, if you faced a dominant edge rusher or something where it was just like, okay, we're not going to be able to move the ball at all because the offensive line can't hold up. And I think this offensive line can hold up with just about anybody. Even after that game, Wisconsin's defense is still ranked 3rd in the country.
Wow.
And according to SP Plus. So, from that, when you look at it like that and you think, okay, over 300 yards, not the most efficient run game, but 38 points, that's a pretty impressive performance. By the offense as a whole, but I thought the offensive line did a great job.
Do you think Wisconsin's defense? Let me rephrase that. Do you think this front seven of Wisconsin's will be the best front seven that Michigan faces all year?
Yes.
Better than Penn State.
That was going to be the one that I thought would be close. The Penn State pass rush is probably a little bit better. The Temple transfer from Penn State is nasty. I can't think of his name. I'm looking it up right now. But Penn State's, when you count the whole 7, I would say that Wisconsin is a little bit better. I think all 4 of Wisconsin's linebackers are good. I think
Arnold Ebiketie.
Yes. Yep. He's very good. PJ Mustipher is a good player. And their Penn State's linebackers are very good.
They're athletic as hell.
Yep. When you're talking about the total 7, I think Penn State maybe has 2 that are, either average or a little bit below. And I think Wisconsin really only has 1. You could argue Benton, but I think Mullins is really their only weak spot. Henningsen, I think is how you say his name. He played a great game against Michigan. Their 4 linebackers are good. I think Benton is good. So, yeah, I think their front 7 is probably the best. I think Penn State's a lot better than Wisconsin on the back end.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like Joey Porter Jr. and that one safety that they've got. I forgot his name.
Jaquan Brisker.
Yeah, Brisker. And then isn't Tariq Castro-Fields still there?
Yep, he's the other corner. And then
he's been there for a while now.
Jair Brown, I'm not sure where he came from, but he was a transfer.
Yeah. I think they got some good players on that defense.
Yeah,
that was a question I was going to ask, because Wisconsin's defense is so good in that front 7, and Michigan kind of just, I don't want to say toyed with them, but they looked really good against them.
Yeah, I think if they would have got it to a stalemate, I would have felt good, and I think they did much better than that. So yes, that's a step for sure. That's a step in the right direction for the O-line. And I just think moving forward, those guys, I mean, Stuber and Vistardis obviously are season Hayes somewhat too. But I just think you're going to see continued growth from Keegan and Zinner, and it's really going to make it a complete line. So yeah, I thought they did very well on Saturday.
So let's transition over to this Nebraska game that we've got coming up this week, and it's a 7:30 game, night game. It'll be Nebraska's Super Bowl for this year. They're 3-3, I think. Heading into this game, first game they looked pretty bad against Illinois, and then they've steadily improved from there. Watching a lot of Nebraska, like a lot of the rewatch, they thrive on chaos. They're the craziest team I think I've ever seen play this year. It seems like every offensive play, the offensive line's breaking down, and Martinez is just pulling a play out of his ass to try and make something happen for that offense. Just throwing it up to his big wide receiver. I think his name is Toure, Samori Toure, I think is his name.
Yep.
Their offensive line is really bad. Michigan's front 7 is extremely good this year. Kind of talk about what you're going to be looking for from our pass rush against that Nebraska O-line.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about a little bit in the discussion with Ojabo, but when the offensive lines across the country this year there doesn't seem to be as many dominant units overall as there usually is. When there's a weak spot, when you've got 2 guys like Ojabo and Hutch, Michigan will find it. I think defensively, you're obviously worried about Martinez in the big play. The run game is okay. It's not great. It's honestly the best when Martinez is heavily involved in it. I feel like I'm being overconfident with it, but I think Michigan's defensive front is going to control the game. Right now, at least on our lads, they're listing 2 freshman starters at tackle. And someone else that's why I've only watched about a game and a
Yeah, they
half.
both have. One of them has like a super weird name.
Yeah.
Like, he's like Russian or something.
Prochaska.
Yeah, that's it. Starts with a P, but I can't remember how you
And
pronounce
then
it.
Turner,
Corcoran or Cochran or something.
Yeah. And he was a big that was a battle for them to land him.
Yep.
But that is not, no matter how good they are, even if they're all world as freshmen, that is not a fun matchup for them.
No, it's not. The
when
matchup
you
I'm really looking for is that Mozzie Smith and Cam Jurgen matchup.
Yeah. I think on the interior offensive line, I think they should be able to hold up a little bit. I just think on the edge, and if they can't block our edge, their offense, no matter how good, and I think Adrian Martinez is probably the best quarterback in the West, Big Ten West. So
yeah, it's a really small sample size, or like a really low bar to set.
Yeah, I agree, but I do think he is a player. But no matter how good he is, I think that can be neutralized with Michigan's defensive front.
Yep.
And I think they're very undisciplined on the offensive line. A couple of the clips I was watching, you mentioned the thriving on chaos, and God, they get a lot of penalties.
Yeah, they do. Tons of holdings and tons of false starts, and they're undisciplined. That's a Scott Frost team.
Yep.
So I don't know. Torre is going to be covered by Gray, probably. That's probably our top corner, and he's like a 6'3", 200-pound guy, and Gray has the length and the coverage ability to, I think, stick with him pretty well. I would like to see, man, I don't know, like Nebraska, like I want to be nervous for this game, but I just can't. I think the only thing that is like kind of holding me back from being so confident is the fact that they thrive on chaos so much. I feel like they're going to get a couple of plays here and there that might turn into big plays just because it's just something that Martinez just pulls out of his ass or something.
Yeah, the environment definitely worries me. And Michigan always has the under Harbaugh, they always have the potential, at least, to engage in the slugfest. If Nebraska wants to keep it ugly, sometimes Harbaugh's teams have a tendency to engage that, and it's going to have to be a similar game plan as it was against Wisconsin. Beat them at the things that they're not very good at, and go from there.
So, speaking of things that they're not good at, let's focus on Nebraska's defense against our offense. What are some things that you see? Because Nebraska's defense, I think overall, is ranked like 13th in the nation so far. So, what are some things that you see from Nebraska's defense that you were like, okay, we need to attack those weak spots?
Yeah, so according to S&P Plus, they've got the number 20 defense, which is quite a bit better than their offense. Their offense is at 34. But the defense is probably the second best we will have seen to this point. You could
better
argue,
than Washington?
I was going to say you could argue Washington, but Washington's front, I think, was a little bit overrated. I think if
their pass defense is locked down.
Yeah, I think if you took Washington's DBs and put them on Nebraska, you'd have a really good defense.
Gotcha.
Because I think their front is pretty good. They've got a couple guys up front. The guy that was quoted, JoJo, why did I forget his last name? JoJo Doman. He was quoted, about Michigan's run game already this week. He's their real player. To me, at least, Contown did a little bit of a deeper dive on them today, and he mentioned Garrett Nelson as the guy in kind of the front seven.
Yeah, he's that linebacker.
Yeah. They play a little bit of a hybrid scheme, and credit to Contown here for doing a little bit deeper dive into their defense.
Yeah.
But they play a little bit of a hybrid scheme, little 4-2-5. They're listed as a 3-4.
It's more of a 3-3-5 because that JoJo Doman guy is kind of like that hybrid linebacker safety.
Yep, that's exact. I was going to call him the Viper, the Star, whatever whatever you want to call it. He's a little bit of a slow safety, but a super lightning fast linebacker. MGO Blog always calls a hybrid space player. So that's what he is. Nebraska in general, we mentioned this a little bit before we started recording, but Michigan doesn't recruit a lot of the same guys here as Nebraska. Nope. So I'm sitting here looking at, their depth chart, and I just don't recognize a ton of the names. I think the big question, you alluded to this, at the start, are we going to get the Illinois version of Nebraska? Or are we going to get the Oklahoma? If we get the Oklahoma version, that defensive front pretty much dominated Oklahoma's offensive line. And I know we've talked about them not being as good this year as they typically are, and not really anywhere close to as good.
Yeah, Oklahoma's offensive line is terrible.
But
legitimately.
Yeah. But Nebraska did control that game pretty well. So
Oklahoma's had their fair share of issues this year too. So
absolutely. I think Michigan should be able to run the ball fairly well against this front.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, does it become a rock fight? Does it, or do they go in with kind of the same attack that they did against Wisconsin? We're going to beat you through the air. That's going to, we may not be all that efficient running the ball, but, you're going to have to stop us through the air. And can Nebraska do that? I'd be a little surprised. Contown mentioned Blake Corum having a big game, and I see that for sure.
Yeah, I don't think they have anybody athletically to match up with Corum on the edges.
Yeah, team speed could be a big gap.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see Michigan go vertical in the passing game once more. I think we need more Roman Wilson. I loved what I saw from Roman in the last game against Wisconsin, so I want to see more of Roman. I would like to see more AJ Henning in the passing game, but can't really have everything. I thought Cornelius was, a great sight to see. I thought Eric Hall had a tremendous game against Wisconsin, so I would like to see them go vertical against this Nebraska team. Other than Cam Taylor-Britt, I don't really know any of their other DBs that they have.
Yeah, Deontay Williams was the guy Contown mentioned as the player to watch there. I did just look at their kind of stats, like the per play. They've actually forced 5 interceptions on defense, but they're giving up 6 yards a pass, which is actually pretty good. And under 4 yards a rush, which is also pretty good. So,
who have they played this year?
So
that's a big thing. That's a big thing too. I know Illinois. They played Michigan State really well. They probably should have beat them.
Yep. So they played Illinois. Then they had a break, I believe, and then it was Oklahoma. Then Michigan State, then Northwestern. Fordham was the in between. So they played Fordham and Buffalo.
Oh.
So Illinois, Fordham, Buffalo, Oklahoma, Michigan State, Northwestern. And Northwestern is bad this year.
Northwestern's terrible. Honestly, I'm not looking forward to that preview because it's going to be a slug. It might be a snore fest for us in that preview.
Yeah.
It could literally be a 15-minute preview if we wanted it to be.
Yeah, so
honestly, it's bad.
They kept Michigan State pretty much in check. They held Michigan State to 254 yards at Michigan State.
Interesting.
And Michigan State only had
Yeah,
one turnover, so it's not like
I've got some. When it comes to the Michigan State game, I've got some things to say about Michigan State. And
they're interesting this year. It's kind of tough to figure out, but
yeah, they seem to thrive. And when I say thrive, I mean thrive on the big plays from their guys like Naylor and Reed.
yep.
So it's going to be a lot of heavy zone schemes in that game. I feel
Yeah.
like keep everything in front, bend don't break.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear that Miami is vastly over. I mean, they're talking about potential coaching change bad
Already. Yeah.
So
and this was before they lost to Virginia.
Yeah. I think we mentioned him a little bit, but Samari Toure, keeping him in check. He's averaging 21 yards a catch this year.
Which means he's literally just going up and catching those 50-50 balls. So
yeah, we haven't. I don't know that we've faced a receiver really close to him. The Western kid that got hurt.
God, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Was pretty good, but so that's going to be a big key, I think. I did.
Would you say Bill Melton is comparable?
Bill Melton, maybe as good, but he's just such a different style. He's just a small.
Yeah, he's smaller guy.
Yeah, and so I think that's a little bit. I mean, unless the smaller guy is Rondale Moore level, I think that's a little bit easier to contain. 6'1" and talented receiver is just harder overall to contain than
Toure just seems like your typical 6'3", 200-pound guy that isn't the greatest at running routes. He's not the most athletic guy, but he's just a 50-50 ball catcher. So you got to limit those, honestly. So I think Nebraska's going to really try and draw some PIs and some try and get some big plays in there, big penalties, and kind of run their offense through that. So I don't know. As long as they stop Adrian Martinez, Nebraska's got no chance whatsoever. So
yeah, and I did just see a tweet that said they are switching up the offensive line. So I don't know if that
interesting.
It looks like this was from Blue by 90. It looks like that Teddy Prochaska, this will be his first start. The left guard, the left guard, this will be his second start. The right guard, this will be his seventh. And Corcoran, this will be his seventh as well.
Ooh, interesting. I think one thing before we head into our last segment of this podcast, I think one thing on defense for Michigan real quick that's going to help out a lot is Mike McDonald practiced against Lamar Jackson for years and years and years. And look, Adrian Martinez is not Lamar Jackson, but he could run the ball. So I think Mike McDonald has an idea on how to defend guys who can really run the ball well, and is that's the best part of their game. So
yeah, it's funny that's one of the things that concerns me a little bit because of how they looked against Rutgers in the read game, the read option read game, and not because Noah Vidal is this all-star runner, but just kind of the fits, and that was after Ross was out, so kind of the fits there make me a little nervous. Anytime an NFL guy comes, I'm always worried about kind of that college style rushing attack. But I agree. I think facing Lamar will give him a kind of an advantage there. So,
yep, I agree. Well, as we head into our last segment, like we do every week, we like to do our little over-unders and make our score predictions for the upcoming games. So we're going to start with our over-unders, and Prize Picks, who's our sponsor, does not have the over-unders out yet. So I'll kind of make them up as we go. So I'm going to start with Cade McNamara. I'm going to go 225.5 yards. Over-under, Matt, what do you think?
Over. I think last week, I think that was a better defense. And I think if he hits a couple more of the kind of the easy throws, he maybe won't be as good with the down the field stuff. But he was right around 200 last week. And I think that was a better defense than Nebraska. So I'll say over.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to go for about 240, 250. I think he'll hit some big shots down the field. He'll get those quick and easy throws, get him warmed up. So I'm gonna go over on that. Let's go Hassan Haskins over under 70 yards, 70 and a half yards, excuse me.
I'll say under.
Okay. I'll go under, but not too much. Like a 60-yard game, I think will be good from Haskins. Over under 90 and a half yards for Blake Corum.
Over. I said it a little bit earlier, but I think he breaks one this game. I think Nebraska is a lot more susceptible to that than Wisconsin was. So I think he'll be over. I think Haskins will be more kind of the efficient guy that he always is. Maybe he has a couple touchdowns. But I think Corum will break one and then have his steady dose too. So I'll say over for Corum.
I'll go over as well. I think he's going to have a really big game. I think he's going to break a couple here and there. He's due for one. It's been a couple weeks since he's had a big run, so I'm gonna go over. I think he'll hover around like 120, 130 yards. So let's go with our last over under. Let's go with Adrian Martinez over under 105 and a half rushing yards.
Oh. Does this count sacks?
Like, no. Is it true rushing yards? True rushing yards.
Okay. So I'll say under, but not by much. If you include sacks, he'll be under by a bunch. But I think he'll have maybe 60, between 60 and 75 yards rushing. So I guess that would be, that'd be half. So it's by a lot, I guess. I'll say under. They'll key on him, I think.
I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over, but by a little bit. Like, he'll hover around that, like, 110, 120 mark. I think Michigan, once they start to get up in their lead, they kind of tend to play soft coverages. So there's not going to be anything downfield, and Adrian's going to run for, like, some garbage time yards, so to speak. Yeah. So I think that's what takes him over.
I didn't think about that. That's fair. Yeah. I'll stay under, though.
You'll stay under? All right. Sounds good. So let's get into our score predictions, Matt. Matt, I'm gonna start off with Contowns real quick.
Okay.
He said 31-17 Michigan. So I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Matt, what about you?
Yep, I was pretty close to that. I've got 35-10. I don't see their Nebraska's offensive line holding up against Michigan's defensive front. So I think it's going to be hard for them to move the ball like that. So I will say 35-10.
I've been going back and forth on my score prediction. I was like, man, kind of nervous for Nebraska's offense a little bit. The more you think about it, the more you talk about it, it's like, man, their offensive line is really bad. Like, bad to the point where I think Michigan's front seven is just going to dominate. So I'm going to go with 38-14 Michigan. I was leaning back and forth between like a 42-24, 45-20. We'll go 38-14. Michigan's front seven will dominate. Nebraska, their defense might hold up a little bit in the first quarter, so it might be like a 10-7, 10-3, 7-3 type of game. I think Michigan's just going to open up the floodgates like it did against Wisconsin last week against, I don't want to say a worse defense, but a defense that's just not as good as Wisconsin's. So I'm going to go 38-14. Michigan.
We're all right in that range.
Yeah, I think we're on the same wavelengths when it comes to this game. So I feel confident heading into this game. I'm not worried about it. I think in years past under different Harbaugh teams, I would have been worried about it. But this team just has a different feel so far, and I love it. I love what I see from Michigan this year, and I hope it continues, obviously. So, and I think it will. So, but yeah, that does it for this episode of the Hail to Michigan podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie, and I was joined today by my gracious co-host, Matt. Contown. We hope to have you back next week for well, no, not next week. Next week's a bye week, so the week after for our preview against Northwestern. I keep forgetting next week's a bye week. So yes, our preview against Northwestern. But in the meantime, check out our podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Rate us, review us, like, subscribe, do everything. And for that, I am Ronnie. This is Matt. And as always, go blue.